Sir Aldred of Gallowmere. Part 1. The Pride of a Knight. The village of Gallowmere lay nestled in a hollow where the woods gave way to rolling meadows and bogs steeped in fog. It was a place of quaint charm, its cobbled streets and timber-framed cottages guarded by the shadow of the ancient keep on the hill. The keep belonged to Sir Aldred, a knight of renown who had returned from many a battlefield with glory clinging to him like the scent of steel and blood. Yet Gallowmere's peace was fragile, for its prosperity depended on its people's toil and the blessings of fortune. The villagers lived simple lives, guided by tradition and bound by superstition. Every child of Gallowmere knew to avoid the cursed fen to the south, where the fog never lifted, and the air was heavy with the stench of decay. It was said that the mire-wraith, a creature of shifting form and sinister intent, dwelt there, preying on the prideful and the desperate. Sir Aldred in his prime had been a man of integrity, a protector of his people, and a symbol of honour. His name was spoken with reverence in Gallowmere's tavern halls, where travellers exchanged tales of his victories. But as the years passed, Aldred grew restless. His wars were fought, his conquests behind him. Now the murmur of his greatness began to wane, replaced by whispers of younger knights, of Harold the Mason's rising fortune, and of rival lords, whose power eclipsed his own. Harold was no knight but a simple craftsman, a builder of sturdy homes and beautiful stonework. He had a kind heart, a good family, and a talent that brought prosperity to Gallowmere. Though Harold never sought comparison, his success stoked an ember of envy in Aldred's chest. For all his valour, Aldred's coffers were dwindling, his lands growing barren. He found himself retreating from the village he once ruled proudly, his steps heavier with each passing day. The villagers, unaware of Aldred's unease, prepared for their midwinter festival, a time of feasting, merriment, and the lighting of lanterns to ward off the season's dark spirits. Harold played no small part in the celebration, crafting a grand stone altar for the village square. Its intricate carvings told the stories of Gallowmere's founding, and its beauty became the talk of the town. Aldred watched from his keep as the villagers gathered in admiration around Harold's work. He clenched his fists, the cheers and laughter below striking a bitter chord in his heart. It was not the altar itself that vexed him, but the sight of Harold basking in their praise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the fen in eerie hues of purple and grey, Aldred stared southward. The stories of the mire-wraith were but myths to him, tales to frighten children. Yet in the quiet of the keep the thought of its power lingered. The fen seemed to call to him, its fog curling like fingers against the darkening sky. A chill ran down his spine, and he dismissed the thought with a shake of his head. The mire-wraith was but a phantom of legend, a shadow of superstition, or so he told himself as he turned away from the window, the weight of his envy pressing harder against his chest. The midwinter festival brought warmth and laughter to Gallowmere, but for Sir Aldred it was a season of bitterness cloaked in forced smiles. He strode into the square clad in his finest tunic, the embroidered sigil of his house shining on his chest. Yet even as he joined the festivities, a disquiet festered within him. Where once his presence commanded awe, now it seemed to pass unnoticed, overshadowed by the murmurs of the crowd. All around villagers gathered, admiring the newly unveiled altar that stood at the square's heart. The carved stone shimmered faintly in the torchlight, its surface alive with images of knights, kings, and the humble folk of Gallowmere's past. Harold the Mason stood beside his creation, his hands dusted with limestone, his wife and children beaming at his side. The villagers clapped him on the back, their voices raised in praise. Aldred lingered at the edge of the crowd, his jaw tight. He forced a smile when a villager turned to greet him, but the words felt hollow on his tongue. "'Tis fine work," said the old blacksmith, nodding toward the altar. "A gift to last the ages. Harold's hands are blessed, no doubt." "Aye," Aldred replied, his voice clipped. "Blessed indeed." He turned on his heel, retreating to the tavern, where the fire blazed and the wine flowed freely. Inside, he found the air thick with conversation. Farmers spoke of Harold's growing fortune, how lords from neighbouring villages had sought his skill, how his name was carried far beyond Gallowmere. "Soon enough," muttered one man, raising his tankard, "Harold'll be as famed as any knight. A builder of kingdoms, mark my words." The laughter that followed grated against Aldred's pride. He downed his drink in a single gulp, the bitter ale doing little to soothe his temper. How had it come to this? Once he had been the heart of Gallowmere, the defender of its people and the bearer of its hopes. Now a mere mason, a man of clay and mortar, was celebrated while he, Sir Aldred of the Crimson Banner, was little more than a shadow. His thoughts turned darker as the night deepened. Why should Harold prosper while he, a knight of noble blood, languished in fading glory? Why did fortune smile on a man who had never held a blade, who knew not the weight of armour nor the sting of battle? The questions gnawed at him, their edges sharpened by pride and envy. Harold's rise felt like an affront, a theft of the respect and reverence that Aldred believed were his by right. As the revelry continued outside, Aldred remained in the tavern, staring into his empty tankard. His hand gripped the table as if to steady himself against the tide of resentment that swelled within. It was then that a stranger's voice reached his ears, low and rasping, like wind over a grave. A knight brought low by a craftsman's shadow. Aldred looked up sharply, his eyes narrowing at the figure seated across the room. The man was cloaked, his face obscured by the hood's shadow. Only his hands were visible, long, pale fingers tracing the rim of a goblet. "What dost thou mean by that?" Aldred demanded, his tone edged with irritation. The figure leaned forward slightly, the firelight catching the faintest gleam of a smile beneath the hood. "Merely that thou art deserving of more. Should not a knight stand above all others? Should not the world bow to one of thy station?" Aldred's lips pressed into a thin line. "Thou speakest boldly for a stranger. But tell me, who art thou to cast judgment on my worth?" The man chuckled softly. "I am but a wanderer, my lord. Yet, methinks thou seekest a way to reclaim what hath been stolen from thee." "Do I not speak truth?" Aldred hesitated, the man's words cutting too close to the heart of his turmoil. He said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. The stranger raised his goblet as if in toast. "Take heed, Sir Knight. The world remembers those who seize their destiny, not those who let it slip through their fingers." With that, the man rose and slipped out of the tavern, leaving Aldred alone with his thoughts. The knight sat there long into the night, the stranger's words echoing in his mind. Was it true? Had he allowed himself to fade into obscurity while lesser men thrived? The question burned like a brand, searing away his doubts and leaving only a single unshakable desire, to reclaim his place no matter the cost. The sky hung low and heavy over Gallowmere, the moon a pale sliver behind the thickening clouds. Sir Aldred's restless steps carried him to the edge of the village, where the cobbled road gave way to the marshy ground of the southern fen. A chill wind whipped at his cloak, and the distant croak of frogs was the only sound in the oppressive stillness. For hours he had wandered the village, the stranger's words from the tavern echoing in his mind. They had stirred something within him, a question he could not silence. Did he truly deserve to be forgotten, his glory buried beneath the weight of Harold's growing renown? As he neared the fen, the fog rose to meet him, curling around his boots like serpents. He paused at the edge, staring into the endless grey expanse. Here was the place of whispers and warnings, of ghost stories told by the firelight. Yet tonight it felt less a place of fear and more a threshold, a gate through which answers might lie. The mire wraith was but a tale, a phantom conjured by peasants to keep their children from wandering into the bogs. But desperation has a way of making the improbable seem plausible, and Aldred's heart beat faster as he stepped forward, the mud squelching beneath his feet. The air grew colder as he ventured deeper into the fen, the mist thickening until the world around him seemed to vanish. The trees became twisted silhouettes, their branches clawing at the sky. His breath clouded before him, the sound unnaturally loud in the smothering quiet. Then he saw it, a faint glimmer through the fog, like firelight glimpsed from far away. He moved toward it, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his sword. The light grew brighter, revealing a figure standing at the center of a small clearing. The figure was neither man nor beast, its form shifting like smoke caught in a breeze. It was tall, impossibly tall, its head crowned with antlers that seemed to grow and recede as Aldred had approached. Its face was hidden beneath a mask of bone, and its eyes glowed faintly, like embers. The Mire-wraith, Aldred froze, his breath caught in his throat. The creature tilted its head as if studying him. Then it spoke, its voice a low, echoing rasp that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Thou comest unbidden to my domain, Sir Knight. What dost thou seek?" Aldred swallowed hard, his mouth dry. I seek to reclaim what is mine, my honor, my name, my place." The wraith's laugh was a hollow, chilling sound. "Honor, name, place? These are the toys of men, fleeting and fragile. Dost thou truly believe they hold worth?" Aldred's hand tightened on his sword, though he made no move to draw it. "They are worth more than thou couldst comprehend. Without them I am naught." The wraith took a step closer, the ground beneath it darkening as though its presence leached the life from the earth. "And yet thou hast come to me. Wouldst thou barter thy mortal pride for that which thou hast lost?" Aldred hesitated, the weight of the question pressing against him. "What is thy price, spirit?" The Mire-wraith's antlers seemed to shift, forming patterns in the mist. "A simple thing. I shall give thee what thou desirest most, a path to reclaim thy glory. In return thou shalt give me but a fragment of thy will, a single thread of thy soul." The words hung in the air, each syllable heavy with unspoken consequence. Aldred felt his heart thunder in his chest, the temptation pulling at him like a tide. "What dost thou mean by a thread of my soul?" he demanded, his voice edged with unease. The wraith's glowing eyes narrowed. "A thread is but a thread. What harm can it bring to lose so small a thing?" Aldred's thoughts raced. The villagers already whispered of Harold as a greater man. His lands withered, his wealth dwindled, his name faded. To walk away now would mean accepting his decline, surrendering to the quiet death of his reputation. "What wouldst thou have me do?" he asked at last, his voice barely above a whisper. The Mire-wraith extended a hand, long skeletal fingers that seemed to flicker at their edges. "There is a man, a craftsman, who stands in thy way. His fortune grows while thine wanes. Remove him, and the village shall see thee as their true saviour. They shall remember thy name." Aldred's heart sank. "Thou speakest of Harold," he murmured. The wraith said nothing, its silence more damning than words. Aldred looked away, his jaw tight. He thought of Harold's children, of his wife. But then he thought of the villagers' laughter, of the cheers that Harold had stolen from him. Pride swelled within him, hot and suffocating. I accept thy terms," he said finally, the words scraping against his throat. The wraith's laughter rang out, echoing through the mist. It reached out and its fingers brushed Aldred's chest. He gasped as a cold, searing pain shot through him, as though something deep within had been plucked away. "It is done," the wraith said, its voice softer now, almost kind. "Go forth, Sir Knight, and claim thy destiny." The clearing fell silent, the wraith vanishing into the mist. Aldred stood alone, his heart heavy yet strangely light. Somewhere deep within he felt a faint void, as if a piece of himself had been taken and replaced with something other. He turned back toward the village, his steps sure but his mind clouded. The pact was sealed and the wheels of fate were set in motion. End of part 1.
Another tale from TripplEXreader. Sir Aldred of Gallowmere. What tales we we shall again inquire. We follow tune to man's desire.